very somatic way. So I'll just give you a little quick information about me so that you understand the lens through which I see the world. So I am a married mother. My husband and I have 3 children between us. We are polyamorous. So we do engage in romantic and intimate relationships with people outside of our marriage with the consent of everyone involved. Having said that, I am not anti monogamy. I often think that is a very important distinction that needs to be made. I just do believe that everybody should be able to fashion the type of relationship structure that is most beneficial for them. I am neurodivergent, which presents itself in relationships in so many ways. So, a lot of those rough lessons, I've learned them and lived them firsthand. I am also very pro kink and spiritual. So, it's interesting that I would have those two together, but um, I do believe that, sex is healing. I think structured sex play can be very beneficial for people, but even just talking about it and embracing it and loving it, being very sex positive just translates to better mental health, better body image. So you can understand why I'm just so passionate about everybody having healthy and fulfilling sex lives. So, the structure of the intimacy coaching that I do focuses on 3 main pillars of intimacy. And when I work with clients on establishing or maintaining that intimacy within their relationships, we first have to start with embodiment. Embodiment is getting out of your head and into your body. It's thinking about your emotions in a way where you're not trying to intellectualize them, but you're trying to feel them. Once somebody gets a sense of embodiment, then we will explore sexuality. And oh, there's so much fun to be had there. But then we also look at how to bring that embodiment and sexuality into our relationships. So those are really the 3 main pillars of intimacy that we're going to address today at a very high level. So first, embodiment. Embodiment, like I said, it's getting out of your head and into your body. It's realizing that your body is full of nerve endings and we can experience pleasure every day in many ways. It's letting your body move in the way that it needs to move instead of trying to be so stiff and rigid all the time. And it's learning how to take your erotic energy and let your body feel that completely. So anytime someone's looking at, maybe their relationship has gotten a little stale, or even if they're not partnered, maybe their relationship with themselves has just gotten a little stale. You ever feel just emotionally or energetically in a rut? Getting into your body and experiencing pleasure is the one of the best ways to get out of that rut. But in order to become embodied, how do you get out of your head and into your body? I am a fan of different types of meditation. And the thought of meditating can be very intimidating to some people. They're thinking, I'm already busy. I've got all these things to do with work and the kids. How am I going to add time to meditate? Well, you only need to do it for maybe 2 minutes at a time. Okay. But you really need to build that relationship with your body throughout the day in order to feel desire, recognize desire, and feel pleasure. So I'm all about bringing everything home with the breath. So if you'll allow me, I would like to invite those of you that are with us to do just a quick breathing exercise. Yes, Monica.
I'll join you. Let's see.
All right.
I'm going to
Thank
do
you.
this. Okay.
All
Let's
right.
do it.
So, when we're coming into our bodies, it's all about just recognizing where our breath is. Thoughts can come into our head, and instead of trying to fight those thoughts, like don't think, don't think, don't think, no, we focus on the breath, okay? So, I like to start with my hand on my chest, breathing in through my nose. And as that air fills up your lungs, you can feel your chest rise, and then you can feel it fall as you exhale. So breathe in and feel how that air feels as it's traveling up your nostrils and down your throat and filling up your chest. And then feel how all of that energy is released as you exhale. Maybe just visualize that energy traveling up through the top of your head. Another breath into the chest and exhale. And then on your next breath, we're going to take that breath even deeper. We're going to breathe into the belly, feel it fill up with air and expand like a balloon. And then feel your body soften and relax as you exhale. Breathing in, and your body expands and you get a little taller. And then exhaling and just letting everything sink into the chair or floor underneath you. Now, a few more breaths into the belly. And this is a really good place to come to. Anytime you've just got, you're overwhelmed with thoughts of the day and you just don't know where to begin, or maybe you've come home from work and you're at home, but you haven't quite left work behind mentally yet. This is a good place. Just come into your breathing and feel your body. And I also like to maybe wiggle my hands too, and just feel how my fingers move as I'm experiencing the world. Because when we are, interacting with the world, our fingers are generally the first parts of ourselves that get to experience sensation. But another place, we can also take that breathing even deeper, where we can breathe deeper down into our pelvic floor. So when you feel that connection with your body, breathe deep into your pelvic floor and inhale, give your pelvic muscles a little squeeze, exhale and relax. So you inhale, expand and squeeze, exhale and relax. And so once you feel connected with your body, that's just a great place to start. Make this a daily practice. Do it several times a day. Do it at the
That was
beginning of
really
date night.
interesting.
Mhm.
We had a question here that says, are there any other practices you can do besides meditation?
So yes, and that's actually some of the things that I'm going to continue talking about.
Great.
Yeah. So I'm also a fan of just, you know, when we think about meditation, we think of it in a very Zen way. But becoming and meditation is the practice of becoming embodied. But once you feel like you're establishing a good connection and a good awareness with your body, then we want to see what else our body can experience. So allow yourself to mindfully engage in pleasurable experiences that don't even have to be sexual. You know, when you're washing your hair, and it feels good to rub your scalp. But how often are we just washing our hair and again, we're in the shower and we're thinking about everything else? Kind of take some time throughout the day to be aware of things that feel good. I also like to think about the things that I know that feel good, that are accessible, are just a great way to again anchor myself back into my body. So I have this one thing I love, which is a furry mitt, and it's so just so soft. I rub it up and down on my arm, you know, and not even in a sexy, playful way. It's just when I'm stressed and I need to kind of decompress, I resort to that non-sexual pleasure to wake up my nerves, and remind me that my body feels good and it's meant to feel good. Movement is also a great thing on so many ways. I like to do something that I call moving meditation. And I call it moving meditation because if you were to see it, it probably could not call it dancing. Um, it's not graceful, but it's really just letting my body feel music. Or sometimes if I'm stressed and I want to cry, it's letting my body act out those emotions. Because as much as we try to suppress our emotions throughout the day, that's just slowly shutting down all of that erotic energy that can run through us. So you have to just kind of let your body feel the emotions. You have to understand what emotions feel like in your body so that you can get a better handle on all the things that you want and don't want. And then once you can let your body process through emotions, that's what gets that erotic energy flowing through you. And erotic energy is my polite way of just saying horniness. But a lot of times when people are suffering from just low desire in general, it's because they're energetically stuck and they need to get back into their bodies. And now I would be remiss if I talked about, sexual arousal at all without just talking on the dual control model of sexual response. We're just going to get a little technical here for a minute. But the dual control model of sexual response is actually that arousal system in your brain, but it's got two levers. It's got the excitation lever and the inhibition lever. So the excitation lever, those are all the things that, like, yes, I am excited. My body is online. I'm feeling sexy. I'm ready to go. The inhibition lever is that there's laundry in the corner. I hear the kids upstairs. I had a bad day at work. I have cramps. I ate too much cheese at lunch, you know? So the inhibition is all the things that are going to kind of kill the mood. So as you start to learn your body, then you start to learn the things that really are getting you excited. And then you start to learn the things that really kind of affect your libido. Um, Now, before I could tell anybody to, play at the things that get them really excited, when we're talking about arousal issues, it's more important to turn off the off items. See what you can do to reduce the things that hit the brakes before worrying about what you can do to rev up the excitement. Any questions on embodiment so far?
We have a question. I think it's more of a like a statement. I don't know. We have
Mm-hmm.
something here. So basically, it's not. This is not allowing yourself to enjoy the feelings. Is that is that what it's happening with uh I guess the model of sexual response? I think that's what they're trying to ask. You did mention that we have to find ways of
Mm-hmm.
turning those things that are blocking you off. So I guess
Yeah.
the answer to that person is yes, like, by you focusing on the inhibition, right?
Mm-hmm.
You are
Yeah.
not allowing yourself to enjoy the feelings that you should be enjoying. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
We're learning all together today. Look at that. I love the interaction here.
I do too. Yes. And sometimes too, it's as simple as just like, you know, sometimes you just need to cry. Sometimes things get stressful. We hold in so many emotions throughout the day. We bite our tongue. some we just gotta just let that out. All right. So now with embodiment, we're going to move on to that next pillar, which is sexuality. And there's so much to address in sexuality, but some main points that I want to highlight are just the importance of shamelessness, understanding our core desires and what our hottest sexual movie is. Now, the first step when really exploring sexuality, and this is something that I with some people I have to spend a lot of time with, is we have to work to de-shamify the things that excite us. One of my favorite quotes about our sexual fantasies, and I couldn't find the original source of the quote, but it's that the erotic mind is not rational, nor is it politically correct. Okay? The things that get us excited and turn us on, generally we don't have control over. And so what happens is a lot of times people have fantasies that they're ashamed by, because it's not in line with their values, or maybe they're just ashamed by because of all of the societal or religious shame that that has influenced their sexual attitudes in their lives. I work with a lot of people that come from, um, very strict cultures in which they weren't allowed to embrace their sexuality or enjoy their body. So, you know, really finding that fire within you. I always like to say everybody's got this sexual alter ego inside of them, that primal id that really just can, if they had their way, watch out. But I want to like kind of let people explore that a little bit. Just because
Yeah.
you fantasize about something doesn't mean you have to do that. But we want to understand where those fantasies mean for us.
100%. And I think, you're right on the dot. Like culturally, a lot of our cultures, like, they don't like you discover it because you discover it, and then you don't even learn if what you
Yeah.
discovered is right or wrong, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there is just a lot of wrong information and misinformation about how you can enjoy all these feelings that you
Right.
are feeling and you don't know how to address. So
Right. And that
sorry, I
you're
thought it would be
allowed
good
to
to.
enjoy it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, especially, as a powerful, strong woman,
Yeah.
and I believe it's so important for us to allow ourselves our fantasies. And, again, they're very personal in nature, but our fantasies can tell us a lot about what we need, and what we need is going to be different for everybody. So everybody has what's called a core desire. That's what they need out of their sex life. For some people, it's feeling loved and adored and cherished. For some people, it might be about feeling powerful. For some people, it might be about just feeling free. So you have to understand what your core desire is. Because when you ask people what makes sex, if you ask people to think about like their greatest sexual memory, it's generally, I mean, yeah, an orgasm was likely part of it, but it's not the orgasm that made it so great. It's because that person was feeling those feelings that they need out of sex, so we want to understand what those core desires are. Anytime I work with individuals or couples, it's one of my first questions that I ask is,
Yeah.
tell me about your best sexual experience you
Is
know
there any exercises that people can go through, like, because there is a lot of people out there that have lost either that spike or have never discovered it, right? Like, they
Yeah.
don't really know themselves that way. So can you
Yeah.
I don't know if this is part of your presentation or not, maybe
Oh,
I'm
so
just
it
jumping,
wasn't, but
but
it wasn't, but that is a great question. A lot of times too, when people don't understand, they don't even know where to begin. They've never allowed themselves to fantasize. So I would actually take them through like common types of fantasy, and we would do some like role play and dirty talk, in different types of scenarios, so that they can see like, ooh, okay, this one's doing it for me. So always a fun game to play
or
with
it
your
will be the
partner too.
contrary. Don't don't call me that ever.
Right. Yes, exactly. Yeah, you can do that with a partner too. You don't need, to hire a professional to play those games. It's all about just
That's so
being
funny.
willing to try. Um, but like thinking about what certain fantasies mean, it's again, we don't want to judge the fantasy, but even when people have similar fantasies, those fantasies could be meeting different needs. So let's say your fantasies are about exhibitionism, having sex in public, you know, understanding what feeling does that fantasy elicit? Is it the danger of getting caught? Is it, you know, just that you're so desire that your partner is going to, take you anywhere and he doesn't care who's watching? Um, is it just, the idea of being naughty? Or for a lot of people, it's just a feeling of freedom and ownership of their body. So it's that, and that's a fun one to explore with people often. Sometimes, certain fantasies can be problematic, so we always try to find like healthy ways to explore them. A very common fantasy is just, the romance fantasy. Some people need to feel cared for, they need to feel indulged, or maybe they just love the idea that their partner knows them so well that they knew how to plan the perfect evening for them, you know? And then, getting a little bit more colorful, other fantasies could involve, aspects of leaving marks of some sort on your partner. Um, for some people, it's the idea of just being dirty. I know someone who his mother had OCD and was such a germaphobe, and he was never allowed to get dirty at all as a kid. So now a lot of his wildest fantasies are very messy. And so it's kind of like reclaiming something that he never got to do when he was younger. Or it could be a matter of just possessiveness. Your partner is yours and you can do whatever you want to them. So it's always fun to explore what the fantasies can mean for people.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I mean, I don't really have these conversations with anyone. I think, a lot of people hold them like very, very private, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
it's a very intimate thing.
Yep.
Um, but it is interesting to understand the correlation between, you know, what is that your lifeline has been with like the things that you want to explore, right? Like, I think it's a
Mm-hmm.
very interesting correlation there. And also, you know the thing about control, can you tell me a little bit more about control? Because
Oh, yes.
I hear that a lot, right? So I,
Mm-hmm.
I think there is something about control that we need to understand a little bit more deeper. So can you just,
Oh,
I know we can
we
have like days of
yeah.
sessions on that, but tell me a little bit superficially about, the
Okay,
control
yeah.
aspect.
And yeah, that really could be another webinar entirely. But with control, oftentimes what it is there's a power dynamic. There is an exchange of power. In a healthy, you know, dom submissive scenario, it's if my partner and I are going to do some power play, it's a really the person who's not in control, like what's considered the sub, they really are in control. So the person who is playing the part of being in control needs to understand that it's a big responsibility, you know. So for a lot of people that feel that desire of wanting to be in a controlling place, uh, it's not necessarily a bad or an unhealthy thing. A lot of times it's an extreme caretaking vibe that they have. I'm going to be in control, which means like I am going to take care of you. I am all powerful and almighty that I can take care of you. There can be a benevolence to it. But yeah, it's fun to explore also because it is going to be different for everybody. And some people also want to give up control. You especially see this at the risk of resorting to like stereotypes, but people that are in very high powered positions or just have lots of responsibilities throughout the day, leaning into those sexual fantasies in which they can give up control and they don't have to make decisions at all, oh, can be so cathartic,
Yeah.
so beautifully cathartic.
But it requires a lot of trust,
It
right?
does, it does, and that's one of the things too that we kind of talk about. We'll kind of talk about trust and building that trust in a moment too. But as we kind of said earlier, like sometimes our fantasies themselves we don't want to talk about or share because they're so personal. But when you're in relationship, I think what's really important to know how to communicate is your hottest sexual movie. So there's a slight difference between your fantasy and your hottest sexual movie. Your fantasy is the thought that just arouses you, no matter how, again, doesn't matter what it is, it's those thoughts that arouse you. The hottest sexual movie is that erotic experience that you actually want to have. So for example, a lot of people might have threesome fantasies, but they don't really necessarily want to or feel the need to like go through the effort of putting that together, you know? So the hottest sexual movie is like your best case scenario. And it doesn't have to be a full blown on, narrative, but you want to understand what do you want to feel? What's the energy? Do you want to feel like do you want it to be a powerful play? There's actually four categories of fantasy and how to sexual movie. So there is that power play that we talked about, whether ceding power or taking power. There is the romantic fantasy, which is all of, I'm gonna pledge my undying love to you. There's that passionate fantasy, which is ripping your clothes off, primal energy. And there's the spiritual fantasy. So that's when sex is like an act of oneness. Um, so people, and that's another thing that I'll do with people is as we explore different types of fantasies to see what resonates with them, then we kind of start mapping out like, okay, what would your ideal sexual encounter look like? And let me just tell you, when you understand what your ideal sexual encounter looks like and you know how to communicate that and your partner is on board, how great is it to direct and curate your own like perfect sexual experience? It can be done.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting. Like what are people's initial thoughts like when you bring this to them, like what are people initial thoughts on like, nah, I don't think my partner will ever buy in on doing that, or
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a partner, how should I go about it, right?
Yeah.
Like what are the people's initial thoughts and how do you guide them through that process?
So, as much as I say, in order to really have good sex, it's so important to get out of your head and into your body. Sometimes situations, whether the confines of their relationship or difficulties in finding a partner, and we do explore like, okay, what options do you have? But sometimes not everything's going to pan out. Sometimes your partner is not going to be on board. So there is a way to experience your fantasy while you're still in your body. So, whether you're by yourself or doing something more traditional with your partner, and you kind of just need to go into that fantasy mindset. So that's really where that embodiment work comes in. When you're and this is a fun thing that I love doing with people. When they get into that deep breath work and they're feeling embodied, and then they really start thinking about their fantasy and their hottest sexual movie, and you see the movement in their body, you see that they're just not thinking about it, they're really experiencing it. That's like why I always say, like, feel your fingers, and yeah, because there's nothing wrong with fantasizing, you know is you can still fantasize and be present in
Yeah.
all important ways. Oh, I
Oh, there
lost
we go.
you.
Recently,
Okay.
I interviewed someone on my podcast that actually does boudoir photography, right?
Oh, yes. Hmm.
And I asked her, like, how do people get prepared for your sessions? Because they're such intimate sessions, right?
Hmm.
And she's explaining the same thing that you are explaining. It's all about being mind, body, and present, right? Like
Hmm.
you have to get into a state that you love yourself enough to enjoy the moment. And I think that is the same thing with, the sexual act, the intimacy, everything. Like you have to give in into acceptance. Is that the bottom line? Like
Yes,
acceptance?
and it carries what over into so many other aspects of life. I have a client who is high up in academia, and he told me that I should call myself a swagger coach, because that that his ability to get into his body and feel his emotions and really find his chi, his power, that confidence and charisma carries forward. And you ever see people that are just so like magnetic? A lot of it is because they're just feeling themselves. They're, loving themselves. And that I think too, when you can develop that good relationship with your body, you start paying attention to how your body feels and not how it looks. I'm all about, like, let's celebrate our belly, let's cellbrate our jiggle, because I'll tell you, I have never met a man that said that they were turned off by, like, a woman's stretch marks or cellulite. No, people
No.
love that jiggle, so just love it. Play with it.
That's
Play with
so
your
funny.
bellies.
Listen, I can stop laughing because you just said magnetic, right? And I
Uh
just
huh.
did the book signing event couple weeks ago. And my friend Amy, shout out to Amy, she was like
Hmm.
talking and she called me magnetic Monica. And now you say magnetic, and I was like, it's totally out of context in what was used. But
Yep.
it just reminded me that she said, she calls me magnetic Monica because of the
So it means
relationship
to,
building.
yeah,
And I was like,
you're
I'm gonna
thinking
use
about
now. I'm gonna go back home and I'm gonna tell my husband. I'm gonna be like, you know what? I'm gonna use this term now, but it's gonna be in a different context. So thank you, Amy, and thank you, Kat, for that.
that. You're welcome.
Oh,
And I
that's
love
so
the idea
funny.
that you're going to giggle now the next time it comes up randomly in conversation. You're going to think of
Oh yeah,
me and Amy and get a little smile on your
of
face. So
course
that
I
makes me
am.
happy.
Love it, love it. All right, I'm sorry. I'm
So,
sorry to
no,
cut you off.
we're
Let's move
good.
on. Let's
We're
move on.
good. Yeah. So the final pillar of intimacy comes into your relationships. Embodiment is about your relationship with yourself, but then we also have to look at your relationship with your partner, and how that is affected by your intimacy and your erotic drive. So, in relationships, the things that I like to focus on first are the balance between attachment and individuation, and then how to prioritize erotic time with your partner, and how to connect with them, really on that physical level, so that you can build trust to better communicate what it is you want. So many of you know are probably familiar with Esther Perel. She's probably one of my favorites in the industry, but she's got so many great quotes on this very thing. And one of them that I love is eroticism thrives in the space between the self and the other. Putting it another way, you know, uh, Dr. Emily Nagoski has a great quote that is, "Love is about having, and desire is about wanting. And sometimes you just can't want what you already have." So that's why oftentimes in long-term relationships, we want our partners, but there's less novelty and things kind of get a little So, I always like to remind people that when you fell in love with your partner, you know, you loved them as their own individual person. 15, 20 years later, their husband, the father of your children, maybe co-business owner, co-running the family. There are all these other things as an extension of you. So I always just try to tell people, find do something where your autonomy and agency is often recognized. And for monogamous couples, oftentimes that just looks like having your own hobbies and your own friends. Not to say that you, can't do anything together, but it's about kind of cultivating the things that excite you and your passions, all those things that made your partner fall head over heels in love with you. How can you take care of yourself? Again, you need to take care of yourself, but similarly let your partner take care of themselves, to really see each other in that light, or just be reminded that, hey, they are another person with their own thoughts, their own fantasies, their own dreams, completely separate from me. So sometimes we need to remind ourselves and our partners of that.
I have a question here that someone's asking. It
Mm-hmm.
says, how can we compromise in both of our wants?
Mm. Ooh, that's a loaded question because
I'm like, I
I
don't
mean
know.
because no, well, I mean because sometimes the wants can be completely different. When we
Yeah.
when we think about when we think about it in terms of how to sexual a movie too, sometimes you're just going to have to guest star in your partner's movie and they're going to guest star in yours. you know if your movies can align, great, wonderful, have fun. But yeah, the reality is we're not going to always want the same thing. Sometimes there's like different dimensions that a sexual experience can exist in as well. It's, again, it can be about the love between us, the very sweet moment. Sometimes it can be about the power dynamic. And yeah, oftentimes two people are kind of in different places. So and that's why when we one of the things that I really like to do, um, when it comes to compromising, or trying to get on the same page as my partner, is I really like to practice some attunement exercises. And I know it sounds, not all couples, are ready to do this right away. Um, so I do also, when I'm working with couples, I like to also work with them individually. But the attuning is just kind of when you're connected to your own body and then your partner is connected to their own body, and you can just kind of be together. And sometimes no talking. I know for me, sometimes it's better if there's no talking. It gets our nervous systems in a more regulated place. It calms us. So sometimes before you start like sharing your wants, it's important to transition into a place where you're both in that mindset to hear and communicate. So like where I have on this slide where it says prioritization, that could mean anything from just having a regularly scheduled date night to just, again, carving out time to have these sexual discussions. So many people in long-term relationships, when they're missing out on intimacy, a big thing that that I hear people say is spontaneity. They want it to be spontaneous. The idea of scheduling sex sounds so unsexy, but I will tell you, earlier on in your relationship, it seemed spontaneous, but when you're dating someone, just sometimes the act of going to see them kind of puts in your head that, like, okay, some sexy times on the table. So you have to schedule that intentional time together. And I say intentional because when you're living with someone, when you're doing chores around the house and taking care of the kids and the dogs, that's not necessarily intentional sexy time. So you really do need to carve that space out for it. My husband and I, every Wednesdays, we tell the kids, go, don't come home until 10:30. This is our time. So
I love that. I
mhm.
just wish mine could drive.
I know. I will say I'm very privileged in that regard, but there's hope. It's on the horizon.
100%.
Um,
There is no
yeah,
better time that when she tells me, "Oh, somebody invited me to the movies." I was like, "Go, go, like
yeah,
goodbye. See you
yes,
tomorrow." I'm just kidding.
yes, exactly. And it's I think a lot of people too, especially women, feel guilty about that.
Yeah,
I talk to people and like they won't even lock their bedroom door. They won't close their bedroom door because the kids might come in. And at some
yeah.
point you gotta say, like, your kids are gonna be fine. You can close that door. You
I'm
know?
like, go away, go away.
Yes. Yes. But yeah, and then you got to take that time to attune, and it's a good transition too, when my husband and I get together, or even just when I'm working with a client, I we take a we take time at the beginning of each session you know drop into our own bodies so that we can connect with each other, and that's so important. And once you can kind of get your limbic systems in a regulated place, then that's when you can have conversations with empathy and compassion and compromise. But you can't have those productive conversations until you're both, in a regulated state. So, any
Awesome,
questions
awesome.
on relationships?
No, we don't have any so far.
All right. Well, if there are any other questions, I mean, yeah, on any of these topics, there are so many rabbit holes we can go
Yeah,
down, and as you can tell, I just
yeah,
love talking about this, and I love helping people
yeah.
find that passion in them.
Yeah. I guess, you and I have very open conversations, but I know a lot of people don't really have either the access or they don't even know where to start asking, right? So I'm just going
Hmm.
to ask some questions for
Sure.
maybe you and I have already talked about this, but I'm just going to ask some questions so maybe people is thinking them out there, right?
Hmm.
Like how I guess how can you tell people how they can initiate that conversation if it hasn't happened in a while, right? Like if you don't feel that intimacy is there, if you feel that you need to have that conversation, can you
Hmm.
give them some tips about
Yeah.
how they can initiate that conversation?
Yeah. First, I think one of the most important things is to not ascribe or assume any ill intent. Sometimes when we have hurt feelings, there's a sense of, you don't want me anymore. You don't desire me. Don't. Yes, it can feel that way, but it's important to not try to presume what your partner is or is not feeling. So kind of state your need. Like, hey, I'm feeling disconnected from you in some way. Is there something, you know, is there something going on? Is it something that you've thought of? Because there could be issues with, depression, or just, again, when we talked about that dual control model, sometimes there's a lot of stuff on the brakes, and life happens. Everything that happens is going to affect,
Yeah.
our erotic energy.
Yeah. I think it's also important for women to understand that you don't need to be the Instagram model, right?
Right.
Like it's really, really important. I've always carried something with me that my husband told me.
Mm-hmm.
There is the hot girl and there is the beautiful girl, right?
Yes.
And then I will consider you both depending on the situation. That's what he tells me,
Yes.
right? You're
Mm-hmm.
beautiful every morning. You don't need like, makeup, whatever. Like he tells me all these things, right? But then there is the hot girl that,
Mm-hmm.
is going to cut their attention because we're not 20 anymore, and that's
Right.
okay. Right? So I think us as women need to understand the difference between having that impact of desire in either
Mm-hmm.
your partner or whatever,
Yeah.
whoever it is that you're with, right? And then the hot flash moment that anyone can feel because of eye candy, right? Like
Right.
I
Yeah.
think it's important for us women to kind of understand that we are okay whichever way we are, as far
Yes.
as we consider ourselves that.
Yes. Hotness and sex appeal is attitude. It is all about attitude, And I know it sounds cliche, but I mean, I was at a rock concert a few months ago, and it was a band from the '80s. So it's they're not young, um, and I'm just like, I'm looking at these guys. I'm like, man, they are sexy, because it's about that attitude, and I love when I love when people find that part of themselves, when they find that sense of erotic embodiment. Again, it doesn't matter what size you are or anything like that. That is sexy.
Yeah. No, I mean, and sometimes it all depends how you wake up, right? Sometimes you
Yeah.
are so troubled that you're like, you don't even look in the mirror. And sometimes you're like, oh, I am like,
Yeah.
today, these clothes, this outfit, this
Yes.
hair,
And
you know?
yes, and I think
It's
it's important
amazing.
too to like
Yeah.
honor. Yeah, I think it's important too to honor the
Yeah.
times where, like, sometimes you're just not feeling it, and that's
Hmm.
okay too. It's
Yeah.
like, but you can't shame yourself. I know, and I've been guilty of it. Sometimes getting in a spiral of like, oh my gosh, I haven't
Hmm.
felt sexy lately, and I'm a coach.
Yeah.
It happens, and that's okay.
I guess another question that would be helpful for anyone listening and viewing us will be how to have that conversation in a non-judgmental way. How
Mm.
important is that? Can you
Ooh,
tell us?
judgment and that fear of judgment and that shame can shut down so much. You know, um, a lot of people aren't ready to have those full conversations with their partner. And so what I do is I try to build that safe, secure relationship with them, to let them know, like, yes, that fantasy was hot. I'm not going to yuck anyone's yum, and especially when you can understand, like, the driving factor behind certain fantasies. I want to celebrate that with people. I want to celebrate with people all the things that they want, and then we find ways to get it. But it's about celebrating where they are, and then hopefully that gives them the confidence to then have that conversation with the partner. It's one of the reasons why I'm such an advocate of, like, very sex positive communities and kink communities, because it's just a very, I think I had told you once the last time we spoke, one of the things that I love about going to those types of clubs is it's a body positive environment. People are just living their authentic selves and just being
Mhm.
embraced and accepted for it. And that is so important.
100%, a hundred
Yeah.
percent. And I think, it is a slow learning, because in this world that we live in right now, everything is a competition, everything
Hmm.
is censored, everything I mean, I can't even imagine how many messages I'm going to get from LinkedIn, people saying, oh, that was unprofessional, you shouldn't be
Hmm.
talking about that on LinkedIn. So anyways, everything is censored, everything is a taboo, everything is. And I mean, the reality is that, you know just so you guys know, Kat and I don't have the same vision when it comes to, the way that she lives her sexual life with multiple partners and mine. We're very different, but we respect so much each other and we learn so much from each other that we are actually giving each other a gift. And we're giving you guys a gift also, because, here we are opening all of our minds in our lives into understanding how everybody works, and everybody works differently. So the more we're open to have these conversations and to be able to live a life of, I like you said earlier, it was shame. I can't even pronounce the word because it was so long. Shame,
Hmm.
like not.
Shamelessness.
Yes, I'm like, I can't even pronounce it.
A lot of
It,
syllables.
it will
Mhm.
be it will be beautiful. It will be beautiful.
Yeah.
And then, those generations that are here or coming behind us will be much better in having, these type of healthy, conversations. So I really appreciate you being here. I really appreciate you having taken this step. And if you don't know Kat's story, please listen to her story. It's a roller coaster of emotions. Okay. um it is an amazing story. And I think, you stepping into your power and getting to do now what you always wanted to do. We can see it on your smile, in your, like, in your skin, you're shining. It's amazing. And we are lucky to have you. So thank you. And for
Thank
those
you.
that want to learn more, need to have a conversation, need to explore new things, are in a place where you need, to reignite that within yourself, with your partner, please reach out to Kat at Armory Wellness. And I'm actually putting the website over there, armorywellness.com. And again, can't thank you enough for everything that you're doing for us.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you.
Have a good night, everybody. And I hope this was helpful to you all. Take care.